everybody, welcome back to my channel. In today's video, I'm going to be reading to you 4 Reddit no sleep stories. You guys have been really liking my longer TikTok videos, so I asked in my last storytime video if you would also like me to do longer versions of that, and I got a resounding yes from a couple comments as well as a few DMs I got on Instagram about it. So today, buckle up because I have a long video for you guys with some long, scary stories. Whether you want to sit down on the couch and huddle up for the next hour or so, or you want to put this on in the background while you get some cleaning done. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you do, please be sure to give it a big thumbs up, click the subscribe button down below, and turn my post notifications so you never miss a video. I post every Sunday and sometimes Wednesdays at 2 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. Without further ado, let's get right on into the video. Before I read these stories, I also want to mention that I have not fully read through these stories myself because I want us to be hearing them for the first time together. So I skimmed them, but I don't really know what's about to unfold in these stories. So we're in this together. Our first story is by the user J_T13, and it is called, "I took my family to a water park. It ruined our lives." Okay, buddy, we're right here. If you hurry, we can hit the wave pool before we go. I ruffled Will's hair, gave him a little push. He folded his arms, defiant. The racing slide, it's the funnest one. Most fun, I corrected. And whatever you say, Willie. He nodded with a humph, satisfied, and scurried off. He weaved his way through the molasses of the crowd, splitting families and couples as he honed in on the dilapidated porta potty. This was one of the few recent attempts Will had dared to use a bathroom all by himself. He was capping a good run, but being out of the house, I kept an eye on the door for any signs of distress. Said it 100 times, I would have noticed anyone coming or going. Maybe 5 seconds I looked away. Was that enough time for him to jump out and run off in the opposite direction? About 5 minutes after he had gone, I got up. I leaned on the casual arm against the porta potty in a whisper shout over the drone of a few hundred happy pool goers behind me. "Buddy, it's me. How's it going in there?" There was movement inside. I swear it wasn't my imagination. I heard something. I turned and saw my wife, Dippin' Dots in one hand and waving with the other. Can't call it a day at the water park without ice cream. I smiled and wrinkled my nose as a joke. "All right, Will, I'm coming in." The door was unlocked. I made an effort to open it as little as possible and slip inside. I did a double take, turned a full 360, checked the neighboring porta potty, and returned. No, he couldn't have. I peered down, past the toilet seat. Log-sized turds floated in the septic stew below. "Will?" I stepped outside and circled the porta potty. "Will?" I called again. My wife appeared next to me, holding Lila's hand. "What happened? Where's Will?" she asked. "I don't know. He was inside, Lila. Did you see him leave at all?" My daughter shook her head, thrusting a spoonful of dots into her mouth. "You were supposed to be watching him," my wife said. "I know." I grabbed the arm of a man nearby. "Excuse me, sir. Did you see my son leave this porta potty here?" I described Will in detail. He saw the desperation in my eyes, but shook his head. "Sorry. Try the lifeguard station. I'm sure this happens all the time." He wished us luck, and I thanked him. My wife was beginning to cry. She was starting to scare Lila. I ran ahead, cutting through one of the splash pads and hopping the fence to the lifeguard station. "Oh, excuse me, sir." Some acne-riddled teenager with a red and white uniform stood up from behind the desk. My son. I can't find my son. Is there some announcement you can make? Something?" The teen closed his eyes. "Yeah, give me 1 sec. I'm kind of new, so I think—" "I don't have a second. If you can't help, then get me a goddamn manager," I snarled. A petite girl, also in high school by the looks of it, turned the corner, oblivious to the nature of the conversation. "Hey, you can't talk to him like that," she pouted. "There's no need to be rude." I stabbed my finger at her, my temper at the end of its wick. "I'll be as rude to him as I damn well like. Get me a manager or I'll go back there and find one." The police were called, primarily for me. I was screaming, knocking things over, foaming at the mouth, my wife said. The cops said I would have to calm down or they'd handcuff me. They sent out an announcement over the park's PA system. "William, your parents are looking for you at the lifeguard station. If you could find a lifeguard, we can get you back together as soon as possible." "Don't worry," the lifeguard manager said. "We radioed all our employees. He'll be back in no time at all." As it turns out, lost and found children in places like this is fairly common. The problem was, Will never turned up. How do you go home after a day like that? We stayed as long as we could, but it's not like we could sleep on the slides. So the same day I left for the water park with my family, we returned one short. Lila didn't know what was happening. We told her Will had gotten lost and the police were looking for him. She asked why we weren't looking for him. She began to cry. The funny thing about humans is how simultaneously effective and ineffective we are at lying to ourselves. Because a deep part of yourself, something in your core where you know you can trust it, smells the garbage, and yet we'll take that lie and run as far as we can until our legs give out or we crash face first into a wall. After the first day, that piece of me in my core knew I'd never see Will again, but I ran like hell. My lust for closure deflated my marriage like a water balloon with a leak. It was so stupid to think I wouldn't get laughed out of the court during custody proceedings. But the one reprieve I had came yesterday. If I couldn't have answers, if I couldn't have my family or my son back, then I'd have some sweet revenge. This last year, I'd been leading media campaigns, doing interviews, degrading myself to what I used to frown on and call an activist. All to destroy the water park that took my son. The park was small, got a lot of bad press in the local outlets where most of their customers were. Apparently, this wasn't the first incident in the park's history. Far from it, actually, having a long list of lawsuits and scandals, but it was the last straw, and eventually they were forced to close. Yesterday was the first day of the demolition. I watched it in person, one-man audience, and it felt good. I was getting ready to leave around midday when a commotion in the site held me. Axe! Grab the axe! The crew was mayhem, and advantageous to my curiosity, no one was around to stop me hopping the barrier to get a closer look. It's dead! Stop, it's dead! I was too far to see what the men were standing over, and crept closer. That's a world record. Call someone. Who? The police. Animal control. Call someone, for Christ's sake. Where'd you find it? In here. Well, go check it. Be careful, too. I felt my way along the bulldozer, close enough now, and stuck my head in past the hedge. The scene made my knees buckle. I couldn't comprehend what I was looking at. Dead and covered in hacks and slash marks was the python. Never mind a snake, it was the largest animal I'd even seen up close, long as a school bus, longer even, stretched out. Despite its size, it looked thin, as if it hadn't eaten in weeks. Tell me what happened, one of the construction crew asked a young member. We were using the machine and cleaning the area, like you said. Went and knocked over them porta potties, and the dragon came, rearing its head out of one of them holes beneath. The crew began to buzz, taking pictures of the beast and kicking it. The construction man nodded and called for the worker who had gone to check the hole. Come on out. Nothing to find. But boss, the site fell silent. What is it? There's bones. There's bones down here. I woke up screaming the next morning. Wandered around the house until I went for the newspaper. After all the pieces I collected, the bones they found belonged to 10 unique skeletons. It was a reticulated python, the invasive one, 26 feet long. Found the humidity of the park nice and chose a place it wouldn't be found. Headlined the local paper for a day before it was pulled. Previous owners of the park still had some influence in the area. And what did I get? Closure? I would have rather been buried with my unanswered questions. Wow. I feel like everyone's always worried about sharks in pools, but I don't think I've ever heard anyone talking about a snake hiding in a porta potty. And I'll add that to the list of reasons why I do not use porta potties under any circumstances. And I'm sure being in that situation, he probably felt so much guilt, like the 5 seconds he looked away, it's his fault that something happened. When in reality, like, it wasn't his fault for looking away. It's not like he slipped away for the 5 seconds he wasn't looking. He was grabbed in the porta potty, and not by a person, by a snake? I don't even know if that's, like, possible. Obviously, these stories are not real, in case you guys did not know that no-sleep stories are fictional, or at least the majority of them are. But I wonder, I don't think that's possible for a snake to eat a human. Maybe the really big ones, I don't know. But I wonder if it would be plausible for a snake to be like living in like a water park area. And even in the instance of like, oh, maybe not in the US, but like they said, an invasive species. Is that possible, you think? I don't know. Our next story is by the user Blair Daniels, and it's called, I worked as a night guard at a grocery store. They left a strange set of rules. I saw a job listing 2 weeks ago. Wanted, night guard at West Market in Redacted, Pennsylvania. 12 a.m. to 6 a.m. shift. $21 an hour. The whole thing struck me as odd, right off the bat. What kind of a grocery store needed a security guard while it was closed? Was the crime really that bad? But I needed the money, badly. And 2 days later, after a phone interview with a man named Clive, I showed up for my first shift. As soon as I pulled up, I sort of understood why they needed a night guard. The grocery store sat at the edge of a run-down strip mall. Large signs reading "Space for Rent" hung in the store windows, but judging by the dusty glass and flickering street lamps, no one had taken them up on their offer in years. I parked near the front door, and as I approached the building, I saw a woman hurrying away from the store. "You must be Erin," she said breathlessly. "The night guard?" "That's me. Clive left you some instructions. I put them on the conveyor belt at Register 1. She gave me a polite nod and then stepped around me, heading for the only other car in the parking lot. "Oh, thanks." "Be friendly," my inner voice scolded. "She's your new coworker." I turned around. "Hey, what's your name?" But she was already diving into the car. The door slammed, the car reeled out of the parking space, and then she was gone. So much for a new friend. I turned back towards the store. The parking lot was completely empty now, and the nearest streetlight was flickering with an odd, erratic rhythm. A cold wind swept in, whipping a crumpled paper bag across the parking lot. Well, here goes nothing. I stepped up to the store. The glass doors squeaked as they parted for me, and then I stepped inside. Despite its outward appearance, the store was actually pretty nice inside. Bright fluorescent lights shone from overhead. Jazzy music played from hidden speakers. I headed over to Register 1, where a folded piece of paper was waiting for me. I flipped it open and began to read. "Dear Erin, welcome to the West family. We sincerely hope you enjoy your first shift. To help you, we've compiled a list of rules that should make your shift as easy as our fresh-baked apple pie. As a night guard, you are expected to patrol the store every half an hour. Make sure nothing is amiss. You may spend the rest of your time in the break room at the back of the store monitoring the security camera feeds. Do not go down aisle 7. Do not look down aisle 7. If you hear a knocking sound coming from within the freezers in the frozen food aisle, ignore it. If you see a shopping cart that hasn't been put away, please return it to the shopping cart at the front of the store immediately. Do not be alarmed if you find a pool of blood in the meat aisle. Sometimes our meat packages leak. Simply head to the storage closet, get the mop and bucket, and clean it up. However, do not step in the puddle or touch it in any way. If you see a woman in the store, immediately go to the break room and stay there until she leaves. Do not call the police or report a break-in. Do not make eye contact with her. The music we play throughout the store is a pre-recorded disc of instrumental jazz. If the music ever stops, immediately go to the break room and stay there till it resumes. Do not under any circumstances end your shift early. Thank you so much, and again, I hope you enjoy your shift. Clive. I stared at these rules, rereading them slowly. They were so weird. A woman in the store? Avoid aisle 7? I've never been given instructions like this, even when I worked as a bouncer at a nightclub in a bad part of town. Maybe it was a test. They wanted to see how well I could follow instructions, no matter how absurd they were. I looked up at the security camera staring me down in the corner. Okay, challenge accepted. I glanced at my phone, 12:06. Might as well get my first patrol out of the way now, before getting settled in. It was odd walking through the store when it was so empty and quiet. All of the breads and the muffins had been stored away somewhere. White, opaque plastic had been pulled down over the vegetable display to keep the cold in. When I got to the end, I made a right into the meat section. Sheets of plastic had been pulled over the meat coolers, too. I saw flashes of red through the gaps, but massive ribeye and sirloin steaks. Big slabs of meat with the bone still intact. I averted my eyes. While I wasn't a vegetarian, I never really liked the sight of raw meat. I turned instead to the aisles. Aisle 3, pasta and sauces, all lined up on the shelves, glinting in the fluorescent light. Aisle 4, cookies and snacks. Aisle 5, aisle 6. Oh right, I wasn't supposed to look at aisle 7. I forced myself to look down at the floor. Yeah, it was stupid, but they told me not to look. In the off chance they were going to check the CCTV footage later to grade my performance, I was going to follow every rule. I continued further into the store. A few minutes later, I found the break room, a nondescript brown door with a little square window cut into it. I took note of its location for later. As soon as I was done with this patrol, I was going to break out my laptop and finish watching Friday the 13th 4. And then I was at the west end of the store, the frozen section. I turned down the aisle, heading back towards the front. That's when I saw it. A shopping cart parked askew in the middle of the aisle. I huffed. Of all the rules, this was the one that annoyed me the most. I was hired to be security guard, not cleanup crew. Wasn't it the employee's job to put all the carts away at closing time? Sighing, I began to push it towards the front of the store. The wheels rolled smoothly underneath me. The jazz music played softly in my ears. I turned the corner and walked past the cash registers, heading towards the front door. That's when I heard it. A soft sound, barely audible over the jazz music. I stopped, straining my ears to listen. Several seconds of silence went by, and then I heard it again. It sounded like someone crying. The hairs on my neck stood on end. There's no one in here. The door's been locked the whole time. Unless the customer had accidentally stayed past closing time. Maybe that employee, the woman I run into in the parking lot, didn't notice them and locked up before they could get out. "Who's there?" I called out, a wailing sob in response. My heart plummeted. It sounded like a woman, or possibly even a child. "I'm coming," I called, breaking into a run. "Where are you?" They didn't reply. They just kept sobbing. I frantically continued in the direction of the sound, calling out to them, telling them everything would be okay. But then I stopped dead. The sound. It was coming from aisle 7. Do not go down aisle 7. Do not look down aisle 7. The rules had been very clear about that. I stopped just short of the aisle next to an end cap display of mayonnaise and carefully positioned myself so I was hidden. "I'm going to help you," I called out. "Can you tell me what happened?" They finally spoke, but they didn't answer my question. "Help me," the voice cried through more sobs. "But please?" I wanted to step into the aisle. My foot was already halfway off the floor, ready to run in there and comfort them, but something stopped me. A gut instinct. Little alarm bells going off in my head. Because out of all the aisles, what were the chances the person would be in aisle 7? And besides, they were safe. They were in an empty store with me. It's not like they were in a dark alleyway in the middle of the night. "Come out of the aisle," I called, my voice shaking a little. "Then I'll be able to help you." "Please," the voice replied. "Help me. This is stupid. Clearly some person got stuck in here after closing time and they're scared. Just go into the aisle and help them get home." But there was another part of my brain, the instinctual lizard brain part, and it was screaming at me not to move a muscle. "Do you need me to call someone?" I tried. "Your parents or your family? The police?" "Help me," the voice pleaded again. The "help me," it sounded the same each time they said it, a little stutter at the beginning, an emphasis on me. It almost sounded like a recording or some AI-generated thing, looping over and over. It didn't sound natural. "Come out of the aisle," I shouted. "Come out and I'll help you." The sobs got louder, faster, hysterical. "Help me," the voice pleaded again in a desperate tone that made my stomach twist. I stood there, pressed against the mayonnaise display. Listening to them sob was making my stomach flip-flop, even if it did sound slightly unnatural. I could call the police, I thought. They'd know what to do. Except I'd left my cell phone with my backpack at cash register 1, and getting it would mean crossing aisle 7. The rules didn't say anything walking past aisle 7. They just said I shouldn't go down it or look down it. And I couldn't just stand here and do nothing. What if it really was someone who needed help? A child who'd sprained their ankle and couldn't get up. "Don't worry, I'm getting my phone and calling the police," I called out. Then I took a deep breath and stepped across the threshold of aisle 7 towards register 1. As soon as I took a step, the crying stopped. Just like that, violent sobbing, and then, in an instant, nothing, like a switch had flipped, and the footsteps started. Loud, slapping footsteps of someone running down the aisle, way too large to be a child, coming straight at me. My heart dropped. It's a trap. They're coming for me, and I'm probably going to die here. But as soon as I made it across the aisle, the sound stopped. All I heard were the soft jazz tunes playing through the speakers overhead. I hightailed to the break room, completely forgetting about the cart I was supposed to return. The break room was small and cramped. The little square window in the door had been blacked out with construction paper from the inside. The only source of light came from the computer screen on the desk displaying the security camera feeds. I scrolled through the feeds. I quickly noticed that none of them offered coverage of aisle 7. It seemed like the cameras were intentionally placed to avoid that aisle. After searching the grainy black and white video for anything amiss, I leaned back into the chair and closed my eyes. When I finally opened them again, it was almost 12:30. Time for my next patrol. I didn't want to go. I felt safe here, locked up in this little room, but I also knew I wouldn't be safe if I didn't listen to the rules. I shuddered, imagining what would have happened to me if I'd gone down aisle 7, if I hadn't listened. I pulled myself out of the seat and headed for the door. The store was completely silent, no hysterical sobbing or pounding footsteps. I started my patrol near the back, walking up aisle 17. Cans of food glinted on the shelves as I passed, but when I glanced at them, I didn't see any labels I recognized. No chef ravioli or giant green men, just generically labeled cans of meat stew. In fact, all the aisle had was meat stew. The same cans over and over. I reached the end and turned right, towards the front of the store, and that's when I realized I had already broken one of the rules. The cart. I hadn't returned it. It wasn't where I'd left it. Instead of haphazardly parked near aisle 7, it sat next to one of the cash registers, like some ghost man was checking out his groceries. I paused for a second, hands hovering above the handle, then I grabbed it and headed towards the door. Outside, the parking lot was pitch black, not a single street lamp. The shopping carts are only a few feet from the door, I told myself. Just go in and out. It'll take 2 seconds. I did it as quickly as possible. I ran into the darkness, slammed the shopping cart into the row, and dashed back inside. Then I shut the doors and clicked the lock. Okay, that wasn't too bad, I said to myself, letting out a sigh of relief. For a second, I reveled in the peace of the store, the silence, the safety of being locked inside with no one else with me. But then I stopped. The silence. Oh no, the jazz music wasn't playing. How long had it been off? I'd been so preoccupied with returning the cart, I wasn't even paying attention. I broke into a sprint towards the back of the store, cookies and snacks flashing by me. Then I swerved right and sprinted into the break room. I pulled out the list of rules and read them over again. Do not, under any circumstances, end your shift early. Why did he write that? Was it just because he didn't want anyone flaking out on him? Or if I left early, would some horrible fate befall me? Because I really wanted to leave. I opened my backpack, pulled out the soda I'd brought, and popped it open. Took a sip, scrolled through the security feed. 5 more hours. The next 4 patrols went fairly well. The rules didn't say how long they had to be, so every 30 minutes I sprinted a lap around the store as fast as I could. The whole thing only took about a minute. Then the other 29, I locked myself in the break room. On the second patrol, I heard knocking as I ran down the freezer aisle. It started as a light tapping across the glass, then crescented into loud thumps like someone was slamming their palms against the glass doors. As per the rules, I ignored it. I just kept running until I made it back to the break room. On the last patrol, the music had cut out again, so I quickly detoured and got to the break room as quickly as I could, the silence ringing in my ears. And now here I was in the break room, with 3 hours left. I stared at my phone's clock, ticking slowly towards 3 a.m. I stood up, shaking out my nervous energy, preparing myself to sprint. I had been a runner back in high school, but the past 10 years I'd gotten way out of shape. The last patrol left me panting and breathless, legs aching. My hand closed around the doorknob. My heart hammered in my chest. 3, 2, 1, go. I wrenched the door open and shot out into the store, but I didn't get very far because there was an enormous pool of blood on the floor. I froze, all the air sucked out of my lungs. I stared at the blood shining in the fluorescent lights. The rules said to clean it up, but that would take at least 10 minutes. I wasn't safe out here. I swallowed. Then I hurried to the supply closet, got a mop and a bucket, and started cleaning as fast as I could. This job was messy. I slid the mop through the blood and then dunked it back in the bucket, rinsed and repeated. The soapy water tinged red. A few times it splashed up and almost landed on me, but I did it. I cleaned it all up without touching a drop. Unfortunately, by the time I was finished, it was 3:27, time for my next patrol. I was too tired to run, so I settled for a brisk walk around the store. I headed up through the frozen food. I noticed now there were handprints on the glass doors, handprints of all sizes, tilted and smudged, except the proportions looked all wrong, with fingers that were too long, too thin. I averted my eyes and kept going. 2.5 more hours. My footsteps clicked against the tile floor. The jazz was starting to grate on my nerves. I must have heard the same looping saxophone melody 20 times now. It made me want to punch something. Sighing, I continued towards the produce section, briskly walking past the aisles. Then I stopped. Something caught my eye in one of the aisles. I backed up and took a better look. Someone was standing in aisle 9. A woman. She wore a blue linen dress and black high heels. Long black hair cascaded down her back almost to her waist. She faced away from me, standing still, her thin white arms hanging limply at her sides. In her hand was a basket filled with cuts of raw meat. The rule echoed in my head. If you see a woman in the store, immediately go to the break room. Do not make eye contact with her. I slowly backed up as quietly as I possibly could, then started down the next aisle towards the break room. Click, click, click. I heard her footsteps echo against the tile. I hurried my pace towards the break room, but then I stopped. Her footsteps weren't coming from behind me, they were coming from in front of me. I averted my eyes to the floor, just as I saw 2 black high-heel shoes step into the aisle. I stared at the floor. Do not make eye contact with her. Do not make eye contact with her. The words repeated over and over in my head, but I had to get to the break room, and she was standing in my way. All I could see were shiny high-heeled shoes, and the little drops of blood that leaked out of the meat packages in the baskets, staining the floor. I backed up. That was the only way I could go. I kept my eyes on the floor, careful not to look up, but she was following me. Click, click. For every step I took, I saw a shiny black heel come into view, attached to a thin white calf extended, keeping time with mine. I quickened my pace, so did she. Click, click, click. I wheeled around and broke into a sprint. Click, 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 click. I ran down an aisle at random and sprinted towards the break room, but then halfway down the aisle I stopped. The shopping cart was parked across the middle of the aisle, blocking my way. Not just one cart, several of them, stacked up in a teetering tower that was nearly as tall as the aisles themselves. I was trapped. I backed away, my heart pounding. Click! Slow, methodical footsteps coming towards me, slowly, like a cat stalking its prey. I took my chances. I turned around, sprinted back out into the open, and stepped into the next aisle. Oh no. No. I knew it instantly. A tattered lump of gray clothing and sickly pale blue skin sat on the floor. The person, the creature, the thing folding in on itself in a pose reminiscent of a crying child, but it obviously wasn't anything resembling a human. With its strange lumps and appendages and complete lack of a head, I'd stepped into aisle 7. I immediately reversed direction, but not before the thing unfolded itself and began to move towards me. I whipped around and, screaming, sprinted down the next aisle. Miraculously, I made it to the end in one piece. I veered sharply left towards the break room. Almost there. Almost there. My hand hit the doorknob. I wrenched it open and dove inside. Then I collapsed the chair, panting. I sucked in a breath, staring at the locked door. Am I really safe in here? Technically, the rules never said I would be safe. Maybe staying in here only decreased my chance of death. I turned my attention to the security camera feed on the monitor. It showed the middle of the store, and from what I could see, the aisles were empty. No trace of a woman. I switched to the next feed. The produce section, empty. I switched to the next one. I jumped. She was standing right there, in front of the break room door. She stood so still, the image could have been a photograph, except for the blood slowly dripping from the meat in her basket. I swallowed and glanced away from the monitor at the door. My heart slammed in my ribs when I first saw her shadow under the door. Go away, please. Go away, I pleaded in my mind. The shadow of her head in the window tilted, as if contemplating her next move. Now I knew why the window had been covered. I forced my eyes away and looked back at the screen. She was still standing there, except there was something different about the way she was standing. I squinted at the grainy black and white image, trying to figure out what was going on. When my eyes finally fell on her heels, I realized they were facing forward. But I was still looking at the back of her head, at the long black hair cascading down her waist. Either her hair was hanging over her face, or she turned her head all the way around. It must have been 20 minutes before she began to walk away from the door. I couldn't tell if it was just the low frame rate of these crummy cameras, but her movements looked jerky, body lurching with each step. It made me sick to watch. When she disappeared from the screen, I let out a breath of relief. My hands and legs were shaking weak. Okay, think. The rules said to wait until she left. All I had to do was watch the feed by the front door. As soon as I saw her leave the store, I'd be safe. After a few minutes of sitting there waiting for my heart rate to return to normal, I forced my fingers back to the keyboard. I pressed the arrow key to move to the next feed, the next, and the next, looking for the camera at the front of the store. No. Her face filled the entire screen. Her eyes filled me with horror. They were pure white. No pupils, no irises, just pure white eyes, threaded with spidery veins. I screamed and jumped back. Then I shut my eyes. The rules said don't make eye contact. Did that count? Through the screen? I let out a terrified, shuddering wail and covered my face with my hands, my entire body shaking. When I finally took a peek through my fingers, I saw her, rapidly scaling down the wall, away from the camera on the ceiling like some kind of spider. Then she pushed through the glass doors and disappeared into the night. She'd left. I was safe, or at least as safe as I could be in the cursed grocery store. I glanced at the clock. 3:58 a.m. Time to patrol. I really didn't want to, but I forced myself to swing the door open and run as fast as I could through the store. I saw shopping carts stacked in teetering towers, heard hands pounding against the freezer doors, saw little spots of blood on the shiny tile from the woman as she'd stalked me. And then a minute later, I was done. I locked myself in the break room and for the first time in 10 years began to sob. The remaining patrols went by without incident, though I did hear more sobbing from aisle 7. More banging from the freezers, and then the hour had come to 6 a.m. My heart soared at the sight of the pink dawn sky through the glass doors. I was safe. I was free. When I glanced out into the parking lot, I saw a few cars pulling in. Disgruntled, groggy employees, clutching coffees and heading towards me. As soon as the first one came in, I flew out of the store, ran to my car, and got out of there as fast as I could. I'd never felt such relief, such happiness. I felt like a new man. All of my problems, even my financial ones, seemed dwarfed by what I just endured. When I pulled out of the main road, I rolled down my windows and flicked on the radio. But it wasn't my usual classic rock station that blared through the speakers. Instead, I heard the upbeat tune of a saxophone. And as I listened to that horrible looping melody, I realized that my days as a night guard for West Market might not be over yet. Jesus. Like, what the heck is going on in that store? Why? Why is this store, like, haunted? Or, like, I don't understand. So I was getting stressed towards the end because he didn't put the carts away. Obviously, he had bigger priorities, being chased by that lady, and accidentally steps into aisle 7, but he didn't put the carts away. Also, like, they were, like, teetering on top of each other. Like, I'm thinking, like, they're stacked, like, on top of each other. So I guess you could push the bottom one and hope they don't fall over. But, like, he didn't put the carts away. And he said that, like, on the last run through, there's more carts stacked up. He didn't put the carts away. And then he didn't clean up the blood that was dripping from her basket. Is that an issue? Like, it's so difficult because he, like, wants to run and hide because there's something going on. But then he's, like, breaking rules. So then is it making it worse? Or what the heck is going on here? And I honestly, no matter how scared I was, I would have, like, stuck around, like, once the employees got there and been like, what the heck is going on? Because at least I wouldn't be alone. Like, if something happened, we'd be in this together. But, like, I would have so many questions. If he really thought he was going to, like, leave and then not have to go back ever again, I at least want to know what happened, you know? Otherwise, I'd be afraid of grocery stores for the rest of my life. I think that was such a good story, but, like, there was no resolve to it. And I clicked on the user's profile, and it doesn't seem like there's a part 2. So I'll keep an eye out for a part 2 at some point and see if, like, something else happens. Because the yet in the story was, like, highlighted with, like, a link to the user's profile. So I feel like that means there's going to be another one coming out. I don't know. This is only 27 days old. So that was good. But I wish there was more, like, a resolution or an explanation. I'm, like, left wondering. Our next story is by the user Emma Watson But Dumber. And it's called, My Father is a Park Ranger. He took me with him on the night shift. I should have listened to his rules. Before I start reading this, that also reminds me there's a whole creepypasta story about being a park ranger with, like, multiple parts, and I really want to do a video on that. So, but I don't know how many people have, like, heard that story before. So if you haven't heard it before, let me know, and I will do a whole video on that. It's my favorite creepypasta story ever. But again, I don't know how many people have already heard it. So depending on if you guys want to hear it or not, I would love to do a full dedicated video. And if you haven't heard it, don't look it up. Wait for me to post the video, please. Thanks. Okay. My father is a park ranger. He took me with him on the night shift. I should have listened to his rules. This is how the human mind works. When you're walking through a forest, you don't think too much. You just let the silence surround you. Feel the soft breeze and the branches crack under your feet. It's in our nature to yearn for such scenery. No matter how much we thrive in busy, concrete-soaked cities, forests are always welcoming and refreshing to us. The air is clear and crisp, and daylight plays hide and seek through the tall branches. It's inspiring and beautiful. Sometimes, though, as you walk in your path, your mind begins to focus on small things. Noises, gusts of wind, shadows in the trees. Such silence can be both welcoming and unsettling. Depends on how you view it. Forests are double-sided coins. They hide you away from the tiring city landscape, but expose you to another environment. You're not in control anymore, because this is not your home. You can lie to yourself and build a house there, but you don't belong in a forest. You're merely a visitor. That's national parks for you, an illusion of being in control. The fake freedom you feel when you walk on those marked paths and camp in the square assigned to you. When you think the silence around you is peaceful, but even the silence is an illusion. Visit a forest again. Even when it's silent, is it really? It's not. Complete absolute silence means death. Fear it. My father taught me that. He's a park ranger, and he's been doing this job since forever. I wasn't much of a fan of national parks, especially because most of the time there's no service and the hikes are killing me. I'd rather enjoy nature by swimming in a lake or skiing. Why break your legs to end up to a high point just to see a random valley? Not to mention the animals. They were everywhere. And the insects always got on my nerves. I never understood his love for the forest. I guess that was one of the reasons why he started telling me scary stories from his night shift. Looking back, they were obviously made up, but to younger me, they seemed believable. I used to think that he was so brave for working the night shift. As I got older, I got into horror, and even if I didn't believe in his forest creatures anymore, I still liked the idea of spending the night in a small cabin in the middle of nowhere, just for that dose of adrenaline. When my father said he wanted to take me with him, I accepted immediately. I knew why he offered. See, over the past years, our relationship had taken a big hit. I guess I was growing up, and he didn't know how to handle that. He'd become emotionally distant and seemed to repel any of my tries to open up to him. In return, I'd become uninterested and irritable. In the words of my mother, this would have been a fun way to bond, I guess. We arrived at the park around 9 p.m. His shift started at 10 p.m. and ended at 6 a.m. His Jeep pierced through the darkness and ventured out into the woods. The headlights flashed the trees, turning them white against the black sky. I'd never been on this route, but again, my visits to the park were rare. We drove for a while. Most of the time, people underestimate the size of national parks. It took us an hour and a half to get to the cabin, which wasn't even in the heart of the forest. I saw it. One single trace of humanity in the middle of nowhere. A tiny wooden cabin with flickering light bulbs and watchdogs. Before we got out of the car, my father stopped me. Listen, there's some instructions you need to follow here. I know it might seem unimportant, but they're crucial. Then he handed me a piece of paper, a list of handwritten rules. At first they were ordinary. Don't go out alone in the park, don't leave food out, etc. I thought the rest of the rules had been put there just to freak me out. Dad, I'm not 12 anymore. You can't freak me out with this. I'm not trying to. You wanted to come here with me, so act accordingly. What even is this? If you see a man without an arm, don't help him? We have all kinds of weirdos around here. And this, if the whistling is near you, it means they're far? My father smiled, but his eyes didn't. Some of these are added by superstitious fellas. It's more of a what if, not it's gonna happen to you. Don't go out alone in the park. Always have a working contact device. Don't leave marked paths, unless instructed to and or with proper equipment. Don't leave food out and lock the trash bins. Always keep on the whistle and the badge. If you see a man without an arm, don't help him. Your family is not in here. Remember, there is no reason for you to hear their voices from outside. Lock your car doors, even when you are driving. Check the marks on the trees. There's only 3 types of marks, all triangles. Red, yellow, and green. Other marks are not ours. Don't follow them. If the whistling is near you, it means they're far. If it's far away, it means they're near. Beware of the dead blue. What is dead blue? I asked. My father sighed. You know when you're out in the woods, when you think we hear a silence, but you realize there's dozens of sounds around you from birds and crickets and leaves rustling? Yeah, that's because there's no such thing as silence. Absolute silence? Never. There's always a sound. Moment, life. Dead blue is complete and utter silence. That's our, code name for it. Death-inducing silence. Unnatural. Right? And when that happens, it won't. But if it does, he paused, staring at the steering wheel. Then his head turned to me. His eyes darted from mine to the window behind me. You leave. That being said, he got out of the car and I followed. The cabin was dusty and cramped. I couldn't understand how he could spend 8 hours in here. He had a small TV, but it wasn't working. A desk and a mini fridge. You sit here all alone, I asked. Yeah, why? That freak you out? Don't you get bored? Martin's post is 10 minutes away. Sometimes I just drive over. Nothing really happens out here anyway. My spot is pretty far from the campsites. I just have to patrol from time to time to make sure no one wanders off into the night. But that rarely happens. This is one of the wilder areas, less explored. You haven't explored it all? His eyes sparkled. Wouldn't be possible. So you don't know what's out there? That's the fun of it. You said you wanted the adrenaline. There you go. I nodded. He opened the mini fridge and threw me some juice. Orange juice. I'd mentioned I liked this brand once, and he'd remembered. Maybe our relationship wasn't so bad. We sat next to each other in the small cabin. Dad locked it. I'm not going to lie to you. Most of the time I just sleep. Literally nothing ever happens. So you really didn't see any creatures out there, like the ones you told me about when I was little? I jokingly asked. The only creature out there is my manager, and I'd rather face a million cryptids than talk to him. I laughed. I leaned in to look out the windows. I can't see anything, just my reflection. Want me to dim down the light? Yeah. He did, and the darkness crept inside the tiny cabin. The woods became more prominent, more vivid. The light made by the moon was unbelievable, and the stars were actually visible, compared to the polluted city. The cabin was on a hill, propped up a tree with a trap door and a ladder leading to our car. We could actually see above the tree line into the valley. We spent the first hours talking. Somewhere around midnight, it began dozing off. I didn't want to, but I caved in and fell asleep with my head on the desk. He woke me up. I rubbed my eyes in confusion. What time is it? I got a call from Martin. Right. Who was Martin? I mumbled. The other one in the area. He says he got a call from the campsite and someone's missing. We need to go search for him. We? As in us? Yeah, you'll stay in the back seat. I'm on the phone with Martin right now. I could hear Martin's muffled voice through the speaker. Wait, don't take the kid. Why not? He'll stay in the car. Paul, it could be one of those nights. We won't get out of the car. You can't guarantee that. Well, I can't leave him here, alone in the dark. A pause followed. Look, Paul, I understand you wanted to take a kid to a work day, but I don't know about this one. It could be dangerous. We're literally just going to drive around for a bit. It's fine. Leave him in the cabin. Dad put his hand over to one of the speakers, so I didn't understand what Martin told him. His eyes kept darting to the window behind me. He sighed. Martin will come pick me up. You are staying here. Locked. Turn the lights off and wait for me to return. It's going to take a minute and you'll be safe here. What? I'm not staying here alone. What did Martin tell you to change your mind? It doesn't matter. I'll return in a maximum of a half an hour. You can go back to sleep if you want, or I can call you and we can talk. I was afraid. Truly afraid. I didn't want to show it, especially after I complained that nothing interesting was happening around there. So I reluctantly agreed. My dad opened the trapdoor and climbed down the ladder. Then his face disappeared into the darkness. I saw Martin's car pick him up and drive away. Silence followed. I wish I'd been home, in my bed. Instead, I sat stiff on the chair and waited. And waited. I began imagining the worst. What if they'd crashed? What if a bear had found them? I didn't want to let my fear get the best of me, but I thought about the legends and a set of rules. I hoped the writers were just paranoid. Around 2 a.m., I heard a knock on the trap door. I felt my chest tighten. Another knock followed. I wanted to respond, but something in me didn't allow me to. Then I heard my dad's voice. Kev, open. It's cold out here. It echoed through the cabin. My eyes were dry from the lack of sleep, but my mind was fully awake. I stared at the phone, then at the trap door. Kev, open please. I know you're there. I saw you at the window. I turned off the light completely. I don't know why I had this urge, but if my dad could see me in the window, anyone could. Or anything. And I didn't like to be on display like that. You don't have a key? It locks from the inside. Oh, yeah. How was it? Did you find him? Yeah, we did. He was kind of drunk. We helped him return to his friends. Could have been a lot worse. As I was talking to him, I searched for the keys in the drawer. It was strange because I hadn't heard anyone climbing the ladder, or seen Martin's car drive my dad back to the cabin. How'd you get here without Martin? What do you mean? Open up, Kev. I'm freezing. Answer the question. He did drive me here. Didn't see any headlights. They were off to not draw attention of the animals. I pulled out the crumpled piece of paper. 6. Your family isn't here. Remember, there is no reason for you to hear their voices from outside. My hand was shaking so bad I could barely grab the phone. I skimmed through my contacts. Cade F., Connor, Dad. I called him. The phone was ringing, yet no sound came from beneath the trapdoor. My dad picked up. Everything okay? In the building darkness of the cabin, surrounded by the howling wind, I toned my voice down to a whisper. Dad, someone is out there pretending to be you. A long pause followed. When he spoke, his voice was trembling. Don't open, turn off the lights. Did you turn them off when I told you? I turned them off now. No, you should have turned them off when I left. I'm sorry. It's fine. Don't talk to it. Did you talk to it? Guilt crept up my spine. I don't know why, but I lied. I did not. Good. Stay put. I'm coming after you. But what if the thing sees you? You have to face it. We have ways to distract them. It's fine. Don't be scared. I lied again. I'm not. Good. I love you. I'm coming. I wasn't scared for me. I was scared for him. The voice from below continued. Kev, please open. Please. It's cold. I didn't answer. Knocks followed. The voice went on. Did you talk to someone on the phone, Kev? I lost my phone in the woods. Whoever is out there and has my phone is not me. It's not me. It's not me. It kept repeating, it's not me. It's not me. I began feeling lightheaded. Fear is one thing, but this was a combination of anxiety, stress, and guilt. I tried to control my breaths, but to no avail. The cabin was spinning around me. It's not 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 me. Shut up. Shut up. And it did. Silence followed. I pulled out the list again and started rereading the rules like a lunatic. I kept listening for noises from outside. The wind was still going. Good. No dead blue. Then I heard a loud thud from my wall. Another followed, and another. It sounded like footsteps. They moved to the roof of the cabin. I could hear my heartbeat in my ears. Whatever was out there was now climbing around my cabin. I could hear the scratching outside. I started to cry and cover my mouth with my hand. I just wanted my dad. I wished I could see his face again. The universe somehow ironically responded because my dad's face suddenly appeared at one of the windows. He raised his hand and knocked. I stared at him through my eyebrows. My head tilted. Scarcely breathing, I remained still. He kept knocking. That wasn't my dad. The cabin was tied to a tree at around 10 meters from the ground. He could not be at the window. The creature knocked and knocked, and for what seemed like an eternity, we just made eye contact. Blood was dripping from one of its nostrils. Another phone call woke me from my trance. Kevin, are you there? Are you at the cabin? Yes, and the thing looks like you, and it's in the window. I'm coming right now. I'll shoot it. Don't worry. I'm just about to turn a corner. Dad, I'm really scared for you. Martin's coming too. It's okay. Truly, in a few minutes, Martin's car pulled up. I cried in relief. The thing turned its head to look, then back to me. It opened its mouth wide and, using its fingers, pulled the corners upward to form a smile, then jumped into the woods, into the darkness. Gunshots followed. After a few silent minutes, I called my dad. He picked up. "Where are you?" I asked. "I'm coming to get you." I saw him walk towards the cabin, then heard him climbing up the stairs. I unlocked the trap door and hugged him tight. "What was that? Please tell me we're going home." "We are. I'm so sorry. I should have never put you through this. Come on." As we walked to our car, my blood ran cold. It was not something I'd seen or heard, but the opposite. See, the wind had stopped. The crickets had stopped. Dead blue. I sprinted into the car, got into the driver's seat, then locked the doors. My dad was standing at the front of the car, confused. That's when I got a text, and I hit the gas. I ran him over and turned the car around and sped up into the night. I barely knew how to work it since I didn't have my license, but I left as quick as possible. Behind me, a car followed. When I got to the nearest checkpoint, I stopped. The car was Martin's. He got it alone. "Where's my dad?" I asked. "He took an ATV to get you. Said he'd get there faster. I texted him to turn around and that you were safe." The text he sent me. "Martin and I split up. He may get there faster than me, and if he does, he'll text me to return and head to the checkpoint. There is no one with Martin. He's alone." I thought I'd unlocked the trap door to my dad, when he'd actually taken an ATV and turned to the checkpoint. The thing I'd run over wasn't my dad, and I'd known it since I felt that unnerving silence. However, no one at the checkpoint has seen my father, and as I'm typing this, I'm afraid for him. But a part of me knows he's alive. Maybe he took another route or got lost. Whatever he did, I'll find him. Fascinating. Also, as I finish the story, I realized there's a part 2 and a part 3. And I'm thinking of reading them both. They're both not as long. Oh, okay, there's also a part 4 and 5, but you have to pay for that. So, since parts 2 and 3 aren't as long as the first part, I am going to read both of those to you and then read our final story. So, this one is going to be longer than intended, but I do not feel right just reading the part 1 when I know there is now more parts. That being said, let's jump on into part 2. So much has happened since my last update. While I tell you what happened, please keep one thing in mind. Stay away from the forest. Forget everything that I told you last time about recreation and nature and all that. It's not worth it. It really isn't. I didn't want to say it, but deep down I knew. It was my fault my dad was missing. No matter what cryptic creature roamed the park, he'd been safe until I showed up. Through me, he'd shown them he had a weakness, and they fed on his fear. Now it was possible I would never see him again, and it was all my fault. I knew it. I just chose to bury it deep down in my chest and let it sink deeper in my stomach. A knot that would never disappear. As I was sitting there at the checkpoint, covered in a blanket and shivering from the stress, Martin approached me. As much as I wanted to ask him about the park, the rules, my dad, something inside me didn't know whether to trust him or not. Was he the real Martin? He sat down next to me. "I'm sorry." The night was still cold and unwelcoming. The trees stood tall and sober in front of us, crowned by the dark, never-ending sky. No stars, just black, soulless night. Maybe clouds had rolled in. I kept thinking of how 4 hours ago I'd been searching for constellations with my dad. "What do you mean?" "I'm sorry for your dad." "Don't say that. You say it like he's dead." Martin didn't answer and didn't look at me either. I turned my body towards him. "He's not dead. He isn't." Martin remained silent. Then without thinking, I punched him in the arm. He pulled away and frowned. "It's not my fault. He shouldn't have brought you here." "Tell me everything you know. About this stupid park. I deserve it. You owe it to me, and it's the only way I can actually find him." He stared at me for a while, and so long had passed until his response, I thought he actually decided not to answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was toned down to a whisper. We thought they were lying. Both me and Paul and the others, when we got hired here, we heard the stories, the legends and everything, but assumed those were horror stories passed around. We didn't stop to listen, and didn't believe anything until we saw it with our own eyes. See, this park is huge, and no one ever bothered to explore it. I thought they lacked the resources, but now I just see they were afraid. He stopped to look around. It would be ridiculous of him to hide from anyone right now. Why would he feel ashamed for telling me these things, I thought, but then realized he was probably looking around himself to stay aware, not of someone, but of something. That's the thing. Even when you've been face to face with the supernatural, your mind still searches for a logical explanation. We started writing down the occurrences, trying to find a pattern, or a way to avoid them. We thought that if we wrote down those rules, we might be able to not get inconvenienced much. He wiped his face with his hand. We never knew this could happen. None of us had ever disappeared. We just thought the worst they could do was annoy us, creeped us out, hurt us. He was sweating, and even if it was freezing outside, he kept shaking his head. But Paul always refused to believe. He'd never actually seen anything. I sighed. I felt too alert to let my guard down and cry, but I craved it. Why do you let tourists here? Campers. They only care about those who wander off. They search for it in your soul, the desire to get lost, and then they help you. A shiver ran down my spine for no reason. I hugged myself, then sneezed. I need your help to find him. Tomorrow morning. No, Martin, he could get hurt. I turned towards the dark mass of trees. He's out there, alone, now. Who's out there? Said a woman coming out of the cabin. My dad. He's missing. She frowned and looked at Martin. Which post? 62, he replied. Ugh, that's my next shift. I could look for him with you if you want. I'll take my car and go to the post. Tell you if anything shows up. Martin looked back at the cozy cabin, warmly lit, then into the dark woods. With a sigh, he stood up and started walking towards his car. I followed. He locked the car doors, and then I called my dad. My heart was beating so fast. I thought I would break free from my chest. No answer. I took a deep breath. Right, we should look for his ATV first. Drove back to his post, then we started checking the other paths around the main road. His ATV couldn't have gotten too far. We found it parked in front of a big oak tree, but no trace of my dad. The trees surrounding it made it impossible for the car to pass through, so we came to the grim conclusion that we had to get out and search for him by foot. We ran over the rules one more time to be sure. No weird markings. Dead blue. Whistling loved ones. One-armed man. Got it. I held onto Martin's arm as we sunk deeper into the trees, our flashlights drawing out more shadows than usual. Calling for him, begging him to come out, I yelled his name over and over until my throat started to hurt. I could feel branches hanging onto my clothes in unnatural twisted angles. At one point we stopped dead in our tracks. Ahead of us, behind a tree, something was moving. Who's that? Oh, wouldn't you like to know? We both froze. What? The old lady voice continued. Who could it be? It was as if she was hiding behind a tree. One of her bony hands appeared from one side, and then the other from the other side. She moved them around, tracing the outline of the tree with her fingers. It looked as if she was playing with us, to make the tree seem like it had hands. I knew I had to try. Have you seen my dad? Have you seen my face? She replied instantly. No. Would you like to? I turned to Martin right when the old lady, or whatever it was, jumped out from behind the tree. Even though I hadn't seen her face, I could make out how grotesque it looked, judging from Martin's expression. He fired a few shots, and I heard it wail like nothing else I'd heard before. It felt as if my ears were ripped off. Then silence. I don't think it's safe, Kev. I'm sorry about your dad. I'm sure he's fine, but if we just searched for him in the daylight. No, he could die by then. Every moment is precious. I thought Martin was looking at me angry, but I realized two things. One, he wasn't looking at me, but behind me. He wasn't angry, but confused. Kev, don't move. Right in the moment, I heard the whistle in the distance. If the whistling is near you, it means they're far. If it's far away, it means they're near. I opened my mouth to scream, but right in that instant, as Martin reached for me, I blacked out. When I woke up, I had a terrible headache. I was still in the woods, but Martin was gone, and so was his car. I felt incredibly drained, and my hands were shaking so bad I could barely lift them up. I started walking back to my dad's ATV, hoping I could take it and move on with my search. I checked the time, but something else stood on my phone. The date. It was 1 day later. I'd been in the woods for a whole day. My head foggy, my body stiff. I got on the ATV and figured out how to start it, then drove back to the main road into my father's post. I could see the light on and make out a silhouette. I stopped studying its outline. It looked like it only had one arm. If you see a man without an arm, don't help him. It was too late. He'd seen me and was climbing down the ladder. I got back on the ATV and drove away. Right when I was halfway through, I ran out of gas. Behind me, footsteps. Kid, hold on. I see you met my wife earlier. What a fine woman she is. My head was pulsating. Don't come near me. Come on, you want to find your dad or not? You wouldn't know where he is. I spoke to him this morning. Rage filled me and replaced the fear. I got down and turned to the old man, who had been limping behind me, and hit him. Don't speak about him. Don't you dare. The old man laughed, and I saw his only tooth staring back at me. I pushed him away and started running back to the post. I ran and ran and ran, without looking back until my limbs ached of pain I'd never known before. I got to the post and climbed up the ladder, then locked the trap door and called my mother, who was worried sick about me. I barely managed to get a word out before I collapsed from exhaustion. When I woke up, morning was creeping in. I called my dad one more time. The phone rang a few times. Yeah, Kev? Tears gathered in my eyes. My throat hurt to speak, but I did. Dad? Dad, is that you? Where are you? Kev got out of the forest. They'll let me go. They want you. Okay, that is the end of part 2. Okay, so now on to the final part, or the final free part. It didn't make any sense. I stared at the floor, phone in hand, speechless. What do you mean? Where exactly are you? Kev, don't come after me. I can't do that. I can't just leave you there. I can make out heavy breathing on the other side of the phone. Dad, just tell me where you are. I won't come after you, I promise. I'll be safe. At the checkpoint, I'll send Martin. His voice was trembling. I don't know where I am. I've never been to this side of the forest. I think it's somewhere east. Do you see any markings on the trees? Yeah, but none of the good ones. These markings aren't ours. These markings aren't ours. I paused, and so did he. I had my phone to my right ear, and suddenly someone whistled right next to my left, startling me. I took a deep breath. Relax, it means they're far. There's something else, my dad said. The cabin felt cold, and yet I was sweating. Suffering from an unexplainable fever, I could barely hold the phone anymore. Kev, I'm not alone here. Something else is with me. I can't get out either. It feels like I'm walking in a circle, back and forth, and I'm afraid to go too far. It's as if it's guarding me. It doesn't want me to get out. I heard another whistle to my left. Only this time, it didn't feel like it was directly to my ear anymore. They're getting closer. Right, I have to go. I wanted to hang up, but my hand wasn't listening to me. I just let the phone fall on the ground. In the reflection of the window, I saw myself. Pale, dark veins in my eyes and dry lips. What was going on? I felt like puking. I kneeled, then started rocking back and forth, unsure what to do, how to play this out. I knew that was surely my dad, because the creatures can't talk on the phone. But I didn't know where he was, and something inside me told they wouldn't let him go unless I personally went out to look for him. I didn't know whether Martin would help me again, and judging by how fast he left me alone there, it didn't seem like he was too eager to reach out. My stomach turned and my chest tightened as I puked on the floor of the cabin. The next minutes were a blur. I remember my hands and my knees crawling to the trap and basically falling down the ladder and breaking my ankles on the ground, then trying to stand up and falling. I remained laying on the leaves staring at the sky. I could just fall asleep here. Forever. Another whistle to my left. This time, further away. I didn't have much time until they found me again. Hey, kid. Oh, so soon? I lifted myself from the ground just enough to look at whoever was coming. It was the lady from the checkpoint, the one who said her shift was about to start. I mean, that's how it looked. I didn't know whether it was really her. I didn't answer, just blankly stared at her gray leather boots and ginger ponytail. Are you okay? I stood up. She tried to help me, but I yelled at her not to touch me. Stay away. Now. A look of confusion swept across her face. Where'd you come from? I want to ask you the same thing. What? She smiled, a bit amused. My dad is missing. You find that funny? She scratched her head. Who's your dad? We had the same conversation back at the checkpoint with Martin. You should have remembered. I know he's missing, but I don't know his name. I don't know everyone around here, she replied, annoyed. After I'd told her, she shook her head. Never heard of him. Why isn't anyone talking about this? You park rangers just go missing? Hell, I've been here for 2 days now, and you don't seem to even care. What about my mother? Did you talk to her? Did you talk to Martin since he left me here? Martin didn't come back to the checkpoint, she answered stoically. After that night, we didn't see him again. I stared at her in disbelief. Take me there. If it's really you, I need to talk to more people. I can't be alone here with you. I understand your dad's missing, but it's not exactly like it's just so uncommon around here, and please be polite. Don't let the frustration cloud your judgment and make you unnecessarily irritable. Unnecessarily? I have every right to be angry. What do you mean it's not so uncommon? Martin said no one went missing here. She frowned, tilting her head, then looked away. I was still feeling sick, but at least I could stand on my own 2 legs. Another whistle echoed, this time deep into the woods. Tall trees surrounded us, and the familiar cabin seemed now desolate and rotten. Nothing made sense anymore. Your dad is not the first to go missing. Many went before him, and many will follow. It's not something you can negotiate. It just happens. She slowly shook her head. It's not something well known. We don't want to scare our rangers. When I spoke, I sounded choked out. Who else went missing? She hesitated. Silence filled the space between us, and I could tell she was uncomfortable. I did. I didn't give her time to finish. I'd been running for so long that my legs had gone numb. Hitting my shoulders on tree trunks and struggling not to trip and roll on the ground, I felt like running was the only thing that could save me. Deep in the forest, I wondered how long someone could go without water or food. At some point, I stopped to sit down. I couldn't take it anymore. My heart was literally telling me that if I didn't stop soon, it would. The moment I sat down in the moss, I realized I wasn't alone. I swallowed. I swear to God. In front of me sat the lady. Go away, please. Leave me alone. I just want to help. I don't believe you. I went missing a long time ago. I don't remember what I was doing. Patrolling around, I think. Anyway, Post 62 is notorious for interesting stuff happening around. 62, 24, 46, they're not haunted, generally speaking, but energy points. And them, as far as I know, they come from the earth. They're corpses. Forests used to be humanity's cemeteries, and ritual dumpsters in general. I don't know what went on around here, but these woods have swallowed so much blood. It's like mass, this blood, this death. The more it gathers, it creates this gravity and asks for even more. More blood, more death. She was softly murmuring as if telling a bedtime story. I saw those markings, and even if I didn't recognize them, she was ashamed to call and ask. I thought they'd been part of my training, and not recognizing them would have made me look bad. Back then, no rules were written down, she sighed. Anyways, I came to this clearing in the woods, and while I don't remember how I died, all I know is that I was following my mom's voice. I don't remember what it sounds like now. How long have you been out here? She ignored my question. You are still alive. You could leave. I want to, well, tell you it's not so bad here. She smiled, but her eyes did. There's always something to do here. There's always looking for another. I shook my head as she nodded. Okay, well, you're looking for your dad. I think you already know what you need to do. Look behind you. I did. Behind me, a blue triangle, almost fluorescent. When I turned back to her, she was gone. I walked and walked, each step muffled by the damp earth and fallen leaves. You know, I'd never been in such woods before. They didn't feel alive in the usual way. Millions of little lives roaming around, but they felt like a being of their own, and the earth rose and fell under my feet, almost mocking my breaths. I passed a bridge, then a tunnel in one of these god-forsaken mountains. When I got out of, I could hear whispering and whistles. How are you? Why, I'm fine, just a little ravished. Well, wait. It's soon, I believe. I believe too. Do you believe? Yes, soon. 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 What was about to happen soon? I tried calling out for my dad since my phone and flashlight had died, but someone else answered, and it wasn't him. So I decided to keep my mouth shut. I passed through this garden of roses, clinging onto my clothes. Roses, our most popular and beloved flowers, who never miss a chance to draw blood. In the distance, more trees. One of them looked broken. Coming closer, I realized something was hanging from it. Or someone. I didn't recognize their face. I kept walking and saw more. Hanging from the trees, their bare feet floating above my head, looming over me, I stopped looking at their faces, afraid I'd see my dad. Eventually, I reached this hill and I smelled something burning. Coming closer, I saw this fire and Martin! The minute I'd said that, the pain pierced my shoulder. My back hit the tree. I smelled something metallic. Go away, said Martin. No, it's me. Believe me. I can't do this now. I already saw you 5 times. I don't believe you anymore. No, I'm telling the truth. Another razor flew to me, but I dodged it. I started crying and fell to my knees. I told him about the lady and my dad and the stars and my life in a way that no doppelganger could. They could try to take my life, but they didn't know anything about it. Martin's gaze softened. He sighed. I saw over 12 sunsets here. I had to kill them to eat. The mimics, I ate their meat. They mimicked my family, loved ones. They even mimicked you. I've killed my family countless times here. Countless. We talked for a while. He told me he didn't want to go any further because he'd seen a clearing and had a bad feeling, and I understood. At one point, he interrupted me. Can you hear the fire? Truly, I heard no rustling. Not of the leaves, not of the fire. No wind. Dead blue. Run. I did. With Martin behind me, we ran until the moonlight shone freely. Without the burden of the trees, we'd reached the clearing. I'd stopped, breathless. My dad was laying there, unconscious. I threw myself on the ground and grabbed him, shaking his shoulders. My voice was hoarse and my eyes stung from the tears. Wake up, Dad. Wake up. Please, now. He didn't. Suddenly, Martin let out a wail. I turned around and saw him. Some sort of figure over him. I don't know what it was. Choose. I froze. Someone had whispered right into my left ear. Choose. One or the other. Martin was yelling. My dad was silent. I understood then and there. Dad, I choose him. Let him live. Martin's screams stopped, and my dad started coughing beside me. I turned to him and hugged him tight. He was confused and dizzy. Martin, on the other hand, was laying on the cold earth, his eyes open, his skin bruised. Guilt washed over me. However, I didn't have time to process it because a powerful light shone onto us. A helicopter. I grabbed the ladder without thinking and helped my dad up. The last thing I saw before I looked up was a lady sitting cross-legged on the grass next to Martin's body. We were taken back to the entrance of the park. The next hours were filled with questions. About the park, about our disappearance, about Martin's murder. We're now the prime suspects, but I'm just glad I got out, and I know it's because of his sacrifice. However, I'd really like to speak to him again. I can't rest knowing his innocent soul is out there. I plan on giving more updates on my account. There's one other thing. I'd never dared to admit it. Sometimes when I look at my dad, even weeks after what happened, I wonder if it's really him. Jeez. I'm wondering how long they were out there for. So Martin said something about like 12 sunsets? I mean, to be fair, like who did Martin really think he was gonna pick? Like him or his dad, you know? But I definitely would like, you know, feel bad. Like who wants to choose one person over the other? So if they found Martin's body and they're like, they know that he's dead and like they're trying to like say that they murdered him. I wonder, did they ever find the lady's body? Like, did she just disappear? Like, because to me, it sounded like people just disappear in the forest and no one investigates because they're too scared to. So why did they investigate Martin's? You know, like how did the helicopter find them? Wow, I don't know. I have questions, but this is really good. I'm terrified of being lost in the woods. I will never go camping. I will never go camping because the woods freak me out. I love nature. Nature is beautiful, but I also prefer like sitting in my own backyard, you know? So, yeah, this is a really, really good story. And now I have one final story for you. Technically, I guess this video is going to be 6 stories, which is kind of a bummer because I have OCD and I hate the number 6, but what are you going to do? Our final story is by the user Captain Marvelous, and it's called I Know What Happens When You Die. I was 4 when I first saw it. I lived in a fairly safe and comfortable neighborhood. We never wanted for anything, and I was an only child. I had 2 loving parents. By all accounts, there was no real inciting incident. No trauma, no fear, no nothing that would make me hallucinate. I was by all accounts a gifted child who lived with a great, loving parents in a larger house. I remember I had come home from school, I had gotten a snack from the pantry, and I was taking over the living room to watch Power Rangers, as was my after-school tradition. As I walked into the living room, I looked into the backyard. At the time, my little brain could only register a furry lump. A squirrel. It hadn't been torn apart or killed by anything, just died of old age. I knew death was a thing, but I'd never seen it in real life up to this point. This was the first time it occurred. From the corpse of the squirrel, I saw what looked like stringy tethers break loose from its body. Ethereal blue things, barely thicker than twine, pulling apart as I saw a ghostly blue version of the squirrel emerge from its body. It regarded me for a moment as I watched it. Could it see me? Did the dead watch us? Then I saw it immediately scamper off. My family wasn't religious. I wasn't religious. We were Christian, sure, but we didn't exactly visit church every Sunday, nor did we avoid specific vices or espout virtues. Still, we believed in the basics. When you die, you go to heaven, if you're a good person. Hell, if you're a bad person. By the time, I called it heck. Seeing this, well, I didn't know what to do. How was a 4-year-old supposed to handle this? Instead of watching TV, I went to my mom in the office. She was busy on a computer having a serious talk with someone I didn't know. And are you sure it's something serious? If you, I'll have to call you back. We'll pick this up soon. Sure. Goodbye. She hung up the phone, turning her head to look at me. Yes, Danny? Mom, there's a squirrel in the backyard. I'm sure there is, honey. Is that all you wanted to say? Mom, I think it died. Her face twisted into a look of revulsion. All right, dear, let me go get Daddy to take care of it. She left the office. I could hear her calling, Jacob! Jacob, baby, I need you to do something for me. She didn't get it. I mean, how could she? What was there to understand? And I didn't exactly blurt out that I saw ghosts. I was 4. What was I supposed to say? So I hid it. I locked it away in my brain, and it was my little secret. In a way, it gave me catharsis. I wasn't having existential dread at the age of 4, but the unknown still scared me. To know that your soul lives on, well, it gave me some measure of peace even as a child. My parents weren't exactly going to think I was telling the truth either, so why bring it up? Kid me knew the grown-ups couldn't see the stuff kids could, but it was all right. There was no rule book, but I picked up some things as I watched, some minor rules. Creatures had to be big enough. A mouse seemed to be the cutoff. I didn't see ants or gnats appear. From death, it took about 40 seconds for something to break free. I didn't know what would happen if you were brought back after legal death, but I assumed your soul was dragged back to you. You didn't get to fly, but you could walk through walls like a ghost most of the time. That was about all I had gathered for about a few years. Things were good for those 2 years. I had my secret nobody else knew, and it gave me peace. I knew one of the great unknowns of humanity. Me, a kid. I felt like a genius. Then the greater truth was revealed. It was December 8th at about 6:15 in the morning on a Sunday that things went to hell. I had been dreaming peacefully when the scream woke me up. I bolted upright, almost too afraid to speak. My room was on the 2nd floor of the house, and my parents were down the hallway. If I screamed, I'd wake them up. I had nightmares before. Wasn't that all it was? Just a bad dream and a sudden scream? When you're a child, your mind tricks you to justify things. It couldn't trick my eyes, however. Across the street from us was Jeffrey Raymond's. Mr. Raymond's was an old guy, not quite senile, but his best years were behind him. He was a kind man. I loved going to his house when we went trick-or-treating. He liked to boast he gave out full-size candy bars. That made him my favorite neighbor. I got out of my bed to see where the scream had come from, as it had been outside my window and across the street. Was Mr. Raymond's in danger? I didn't know, but I had to look. Mr. Raymond's was entirely blue, just as I had seen other dead things before. But he wasn't acting like himself. He was panicked. He was in his pajamas, howling, screaming, running through walls. He had died, probably from old age. But this wasn't like the squirrels or rabbits I saw. No, he was screeching, sprinting, sometimes going through walls, sometimes hitting them. It's like his body wasn't solid enough. It scared me. I ran down the hall, heavy steps ignoring how early it was. As I'd enter my parents' room, I went to my dad's side of the bed. "Dad," I'd say. "Dad, wake up. Can you wake up?" He'd groggily groan, leaning over to look at the alarm clock. "Hey, bud, it's really early. You okay?" "Nightmare?" he'd ask, sitting up from the bed. Mom wouldn't wake up, heavily sleeping. "I think something bad happened to Mr. Raymond's." Why so, buddy?" "Just a bad feeling." "Nightmare?" "No, can you go check on him?" "Mr. Raymond's might be sleeping. You know he's an old guy, Dad told me." "Dad, can you please?" His eyes said, "I'm not going to sleep until I do this, am I?" But his face said, "Anything for you, sport." He'd push himself up, get on his slippers. All right, I'll go check on him." As Dad went down the stairs, I returned to my room. I'd watched from the second-story window, hearing him open and close the door. Dad waved at a passing jogger, exchanging a quick discussion before he'd walk across the road. All the while, Mr. Raymond's spirit continued to howl, flail, scream. I didn't think it knew where it was or what was going on. Dad knocked on the door. Silence. Dad looked concerned for a moment. He knocked again. Silence. Now I think he knew something was wrong. He'd do a quick jog back across to our house where I'd heard him in the kitchen grabbing the phone and talking to someone. I'd hoped to see Mr. Raymond's spirit calm down, but he just kept screaming, kept running throughout his rooms and through his walls. There's a danger in nature. When an animal gets wounded, it calls for help sometimes. A kind human finds it and pulls it out of a trap. Other times, a fellow member of the species finds it and saves it. But most often, those cries attract a predator. And in this case, Mr. Raymond's spirit was a siren. I stayed glued to the window, watching the scene. My eyes switched between the actions in the physical world as an ambulance pulled up and the spiritual world. Mr. Raymond's ghost tirelessly howling and scrambling around. I wasn't sure how to help him, so I was going to decide to go to bed. That's when I saw it. All this time, I had only seen blue spirits, human, animal, or otherwise. They'd fluctuate in tone and opacity, sure, but always blue. This was the first time I ever saw a red spirit. I scrambled on all fours, long and lanky. Its arms were too long. Its legs not ending in feet, but in two sharp talons. One in the front, one in the back. I covered my mouth, watching what I think was its head bob. It had no eyes, a sort of heavy shell covering the top half of its head. It was beelining to the screaming of Mr. Raymond. Paramedics were having a polite conversation as it barged through them, phasing like a ghost. One paramedic turned around as if someone had tapped his shoulder, but he looked back to his friend. I saw a primal terror in Mr. Raymond's eyes. He knew this was a predator. He screamed, howling less like a man and more like an animal before he charged into the house. The thing followed soon after. I couldn't see it, but I could hear it. Panic screams, guttural cries, and then silence. Eerily quiet. Maybe Mr. Raymond had got away? Maybe he went somewhere further into the afterlife? A child struggled to comprehend non-existence, and the universe was now asking a child to comprehend what came even further after. Nausea was going to overtake me before my dad went into my room, making me turn away from the window. "Hey, kiddo, Hey, Mr. Raymond, listen, Yeah." He seemed unsure how to approach the subject, doubly so considering I somehow knew Mr. Raymond had died. "It's okay, Dad," I whispered. "I thought it was a nightmare, but..." "Bad dreams, I know. Hey, listen, do you want some breakfast?" "Whatever you want." "No, I'm not really hungry right now, but thanks, Dad. I love you lots." "Love you too, buddy." Dad closed the door, probably wanting to give me some peace while I processed this. There were things to process, to be sure, but I didn't want to speak on it. I turned back to the window, watching to see if the red thing had gone. It hadn't. The red thing now stood in the middle of the street, hands twitching. Hands that ended in knives, not fingers, and it was staring at me, without eyes. I covered my mouth in horror. Kid logic said that safety from monsters was always under the blanket. That made sense to me. Scrambling under it as I got away from the window, maybe it hadn't noticed. Maybe it was just a coincidence. Did it want to get me next? Did it want to kill me? The blanket covered me, head to my knees as I hid. I didn't need to see it. I could hear it. The clicking and clacking of its knife fingers on the wall. red glow as it moved inside my room. I was trapped in my blanket quivering, and as it came into my room, it just sat there, knees tight to his chest, right across from me. Time seemed to slow, and I sat under the blanket for a minute, 20, 2 hours, I don't know, but it wouldn't leave, sitting there watching me. I felt bile well in my throat. I wanted to throw it from panic and dread. Experimentally, and against the child's code of what kept you safe, I removed the blanket. The thing was easily 7 feet tall, maybe more, but its arm length had to be about 8 or more. The shell on its head was more of a carcass, fused to the top of its head like a helmet, leathery and skin taut and tight. The leather stretched over the muscle. The worst was a mouth. It had no lips, no jaws, no normal teeth. What instead I saw was a slowly rotating blender of a hole, sharp and jagged. It was uncanny to feel a stare with no eyes upon you. We locked gazes, or at least I think we did. As I trembled in bed, I think I'd peed myself. Quivering, watching it observe me, I looked back, seemingly unaware of the horror I was in. We were in a stalemate until one long, bony knife finger uncurled. I watched that knife etch into the wall of my room, but not damaging the physical space, but doubtlessly marking my room in the spirit world. It read, "Can you see me?" I looked at the wall, then to it, then to the wall. I nodded. Its razor claw rotated, sharp and jagged teeth spinning. "Can you hear me?" it asked, its voice guttural like it came from a drain pipe clogged with muck. I nodded. Of all the words that came out of its mouth, I didn't expect what it said next. "Sorry, I didn't want to scare you." Sorry? A monster made of knives and jagged pieces was apologizing for scaring me? "Can you hear me?" I asked back. Yes. We stared at each other for an uncomfortable amount of time. "How did you know I could see you?" "Your eyes, they're like a lighthouse. When you looked at me, I thought I was in a spotlight." "Did you hurt him?" I asked bluntly. "Did you hurt Mr. Raymonds?" "Was that his name?" it asked. "Yes, I did. I'm sorry. Things are different when you cross over." "That doesn't make it right," I'd argue. It looked at me, seeming to finally parse that I was a child before it tilted its head. "You will understand in time. What's your name?" "I shouldn't talk to strangers." "I don't want to be a stranger. You're the only voice I've heard since crossing over." It paused, as if trying to figure out how to communicate with a child. "Then what's your name? Strangers don't give out their names." "I don't have a name," it responded. I looked at him. It occurred to me in some childish capacity that not having a name was bad. I looked him over, quivering, ignoring the panic. He might look scary, but he was being too nice, too polite. Just because someone looked horrible didn't mean they couldn't be good, Rocky, I'd say. "Your name is Rocky." "Why?" it asked, tilting his head. "Rocky's the Red Ranger. You're red, so you're Rocky." "Who's the Red Ranger?" I stared at him, realizing he probably didn't know much of anything. As an adult, looking back, I realized how idiotic it all is. The juvenile desire to help, ignoring my own safety because I felt I was special. "Nothing bad ever happened to special people," spoke the childlike mind. "In fact, you can help him, and he won't hurt other people. Evil was a choice, and maybe, just maybe, I can make him something good." "Rocky, do you want to be my friend?" I asked, oblivious in my youth to how stupid this was, only focused on how I could help him. "But you have to promise that you'll be good." "I would like that, very much." Rocky would make no promise, only that he would like that. And there is a part 2, but when I click on it, it says it has been removed. So if it does come back at some point, I will do a follow-up. But I actually think that story is really cute. I feel like that's not the message that's supposed to be the takeaway here, but I think it's so cute that like the evil creature's like worried about the kid. Maybe it's because he's alive and like can't actually harm him. But it's just so cute that he's like, "You can see me? I'm sorry I upset you, you know?" I don't really know what that says about me, but also I'm the type of person that I see like a polar bear and I really wish I could pet it, so there's that. I don't know. I really like that story. Like, to me, it didn't really scare me. I thought it's like kind of heartwarming, even though it's probably not supposed to be. Well, either way, I know we're definitely over the hour mark of this video. So let me know what you guys think about these stories. Please send me any no sleep or creepypasta stories you want me to include in a future video. And let me know if you like this longer form of storytelling content. I really do like making the longer videos for you guys. Anyway, if you guys did like this video, please be sure to give it a big thumbs up. I will pop a couple of custom suggestions for videos that you might be interested in right here. And please click the subscribe button down below to turn on post notifications so you never miss a video. I post every Sunday and sometimes Wednesdays at 2 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. Again, thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video and I will see you next week. Bye.